Hi, everyone. Thanks again for your patience as we got through this little bump, but we are ready to begin. Welcome to today's Art Chat with Linda Fisler. My name's Sherry Haas, and I'll be your moderator today. A few things before we get started. We are recording today's Art Chat, and it'll be posted later at artistnetwork.com and our Artist Network YouTube page. So if you want to listen again, or if you know someone who's unable to join us live, please find it there and feel free to share it. Also, we will have a few minutes at the end to ask questions at the end of today's chat. If you look on your GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen, you'll see a little question box. And that's where you can type in your questions for Linda and Juliette at any time, and I will relay them on your behalf. Okay, it's time to turn things over to Linda. Welcome, Linda. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. Thanks for working through that technical stuff. It's, live is always fun. Let's just put it that way. But I appreciate you working through that really quickly. So, and welcome everybody. Thanks for your patience. And while we get started, this is going to be a great talk with Juliette. And Juliette, welcome to the show. And I want to say congratulations on your new book, Lessons in Classical Painting. And then it says Essential Techniques from the Inside the Atelier. I wanted to talk a little bit. Tell us about your new book and what inspired you to write it.
Thanks for having me on here, Linda. What inspired me to write the book, it wasn't really inspiration, it was sort of pressured. I was pressured into writing it by my students. I had a group of students at the time who said, you've done 3 books. The first 2 are more reference overviews of painting and drawing, and you've done a more intensive how-to book with lessons in classical drawing, and now you've stopped, so it's like a cobbler who makes one shoe. So they inspired me to begin the second book, and I think there's really a need for it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I appreciate that you sent me a copy that I could look through, and one of the things that caught my eye, and of course it's right at the introduction, is the quote from Henry James. It says, "We will work in the dark. We do whatever we can, and we give what we have. Our doubt is our passion, and our passion is our task. The rest is the madness of art." And I just like, oh wow, what a neat quote. So to start that off, that was really, really cool. And
that's one of the dilemmas of an art technique book, because there's 2 sort of interesting elements to it. One is that it's a process that is not entirely controllable. And there's an element of mystery no matter how well you know the subject, and so it's not entirely teachable. There is that element of darkness to it, and the other aspect is that there is much that can be taught, so balancing both the wonder of it and the technical aspect of it.
Yeah, and so let's jump in and start the topics of your book, but let's do so more when we start talking about like the process of art versus the approach that you use to write the book. So let's kind of focus on the art process a little bit. Tell us about your process if you're going to create a painting. Do you start with a tonal like value study, or do you start drawing first? What's your process like? Just kind of describe that a little bit.
So my own personal one versus how it's outlined in the book?
You can actually cover both if you want, or you just talk about your own personal process, whichever you're more comfortable with. We'll put it that way.
Well, it's interesting because I studied for a decade, and so I spent most of those years studying drawing, actually, because learning to see can be taught through drawing, and that is the foundation that underlies almost all techniques in the figurative tradition, no matter how you end up actually building the paint layers. So ideas of being able to get proportion or composition and ideas related to modeling are all drawing-related concepts. And so, my program starts with a foundation in drawing. I think that's the kindest gift you can give to someone when they're studying art, is that first year or 2 just solely focused on that subject. And then, but I've already done a whole book related to that. So this book, we start off right with value painting. So if we take the idea of color, when I was training, I liked to strip a really complex subject down to each of its component parts and just spend as much time as I could studying each of those aspects. I don't know. It's just a quirk of my brain. If I don't understand how it works, I just can't rest. So
right.
With the book, we start with value, and then go on to form painting, and then ideas of temperature and ideas of color. So although personally I started off really learning to draw, transfer drawing, doing a tonal underpainting, and then building up color on top.
Right.
There's nothing necessarily sacred about that application of paint. I mean, that's all it is an application of paint. And there's a lot of different ways to tackle that subject with full integrity. And so in the book, I go through a number of different ways of beginning and continuing that process. And in fact, in my own work, I'll do a drawing and transfer it for one figure piece and not the next. I'll do a color study for a floral color underpainting for a floral piece when it's called for.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, it's one of the things that I find when I'm teaching is that everyone wants to get in there and just kind of throw paint around, and not much thought's given to building the painting, if you will. It's like I consider drawing and composition to be two very important things. I call it one of the four pillars of what I think is important, and so trying to get my students to get away from playing with wonderful, beautiful color and focus on something that is more drawing related or composition related is really hard. But then once they understand that that's so important to enjoying the whole painting as a viewer, it seems to be easier to convince them. Do you run into kind of the same kind of I mean, you're in a totally different world because you're also teaching students in like an atelier, so they kind of have that understanding at the beginning, right?
Well, I work with people in workshop environment and as well as a full-time studio program. So I get to meet a lot of people who are taking their first drawing class or first painting class, and those that continue it a lot longer. And there's so many different reasons to start studying art. So for some of our students, they want to be a full-time professional painter, and for them to for all their investment in time, they really want to make paintings that will live after them and be relevant. And in this, except for if you're really, really, really lucky person, you're not going to make a windfall of money doing this particular occupation. So it tends to tie into people's ideas of meaning and significance. And so for those people, they want to go deep with it. And but for other people who just want to take a class and learn to see better, that's as, in its own way, that's just as exciting and just as important. And for people doing that, enjoy it, get as much of the principles as you can, but the main thing is delight in it and access it from whatever point you can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really been interesting, kind of on a personal journey. I started doing some live model drawing on a couple times a month or just starting out, and of course having friends like you who are wonderful at drawing the human figure, and it's kind of like, oh, I can't do this, I put this roadblock up, I can't do this, but then I started doing this, and it's just like, don't be so hard on yourself, just start looking at line and just some things here, use a value study to get the shapes and different things like that. And I've actually seen that improve in everything else that I've been doing creatively, painting, wise, because you really do start to get, it becomes second nature, I guess, to start analyzing something in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you bring up a really interesting point, because that mantra of I can't do it is really easy to fall into, and not only in painting and drawing, but just about everything. Right. And I think with painting and drawing, perhaps the goal that we're working towards really is a helpful one, to sort of fix our minds on the things that we really love about it, so that we're moving towards something, towards a target that's hittable for us. And with painting and drawing, there's no sort of perfect art form that if we can sort of conform ourselves to it, we'll have arrived. the art that we end up producing that's most significant is also the ones that most clearly reflect us. And so in a way, it's how can we make that target be ourselves, like our best selves, or our thoughts that we most deeply want to leave with people. And you know, we all have tons of thoughts, but the ones we really, really, really want to keep. And so if that's the goal, then it's not that I can't do it necessarily. It's what do I need to do to be able to tap into this? And for that, you know, visual literacy and learning how to paint and technical aspects of art are like the sort of least flashy, least interesting. And the heart of art is related to content and, you know, what are you saying with it, or how did what you create, how is that able to lead people into a deeper experience in their own life? Can they see through their eye, through your eyes or my eyes when they look at our work?
Right.
And but without the technical training, we're really lopped off from you know, ideas of excellence, and you know, we really cut ourselves off from that future by so clearly wanting to separate craft and skill from creativity. Does that answer to it a little?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the biggest thing for me, I guess, what took the pressure off of me when I go to these sessions and do it is, you know, I don't have to share that with anyone. You know, this is my practice. So just going in there with the mindset of this is just totally practice. I'm going to have fun with it, like you said, and what comes out, and I don't have to share it with anyone. And usually by the end of the night, I got one good one that I'm really excited about that I'll end up sharing on social media. But, you know, for the most part, I think just like taking that pressure off of you and saying that you have to share everything with someone, you don't have to. You can keep it to yourself and really strive to force yourself to learn. And, of course, realize, too, that, you know, there are your books, for example, is a great way that if you really decide that you like drawing and you're into studying the human form and things like that, there are references and books, and Juliette's are really good. So, you know, there are ways that you can teach yourself through the books, and there are naturally, you know, courses and things like that you can take as well. So tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your atelier and the setup that you have in Seattle, because I think, you know, of all the times that I think I've had you on the show, we haven't really talked about, you know, your day job, if you will.
Oh, okay. Well, so we'll just touch on one of the things he said. And then I'll transition to the question about the atelier.
Perfect.
I received the most amazing letter 3 weeks ago from a fellow who's serving a sentence in prison, and the letter said that the books have inspired him to help transform his time into something useful with a definite purpose.
Oh,
and
wow.
That prisoners there are allowed to oil paint and draw pretty much all day long, and there's a ton of talented individuals. And so we tend to think that, you know, everyone has access to atelier training, but they don't. And we tend to sort of dismiss technique as something that, you know, isn't as core or central to content. But, you know, if you're this fellow not facing much of a future and being able to tap in, no matter where you are, you know, in your basement in the Midwest, or where, or for this fellow in a prison cell, or for me if I'm sitting in bed one morning, you know, no matter where you are, to be able to tap into deep issues and connect with sight and skill is pretty great. You know, that's a good reason for keeping books around.
Wow, what a great letter.
Yeah, it was really a great letter. The atelier, by contrast to that, is a community. It's my full-time program is embedded in Gage Academy of Art, and people are familiar with Seattle, the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle. And so what that sort of looks like is we have a big building, which is Gage, and then within that, my atelier has a life drawing studio, and then students have individual studio spaces. And so they study over the course of several years, up to 4 or 5 years, working through a curriculum. And the curriculum is not, we have sort of a rhythm to the years, what you'd expect to accomplish at any given point. But we also work with students to come up with what they're most interested in, because there's an elastic quality to the curriculum. You can learn to draw and explore things that happen to be of special interest. Our biggest trouble is time. We want to move through the people through the program, quickly, so they can get out and do the work that they're anxious to do. And so that's our biggest constraint, is how do we give everyone as much information as they possibly can have, and at the same time leave as much room as possible for people's personal take on where they want to go. So that's
Cool.
That's it. But we have a great community. We're wrapping up our year now, and it's just couldn't be more fun. Just hardworking people, and a lot of laughs.
Yeah,
Not always
yeah.
like that, but this year it is.
So real quickly, because I know we'll probably end up getting questions about, at least from the folks that live out in Washington, or anybody that wants to study with you or at your atelier, web address so that they can go out and look at it.
Oh, if you connect, you can either go to gageacademy.org or go to my website is Aristides Arts with the S.com, and both of those can give you information on our atelier. And if you're in Seattle, you're more than welcome to come by and visit. We get visitors periodically, and people who come and sit in the life drawing room with us as well.
Okay, well, I'm sitting here paging through your book as we go. So I'm up to chapter 2, which is form painting, and we're going to jump ship here. And by the way, before I get into this question, I also want to remind folks to type in questions. Juliette has been gracious enough to give us about an hour of her time, so I'm going to be asking some questions here, but make sure that you type your questions in, and probably in about 10 or 15 minutes we're going to go into the question section of the talk. So make sure if you've got any questions for Juliette around drawing, around an atelier, around painting, please type those in so that we can get those answered for you. So as I said, I'm looking through the book right now on form painting, and one of the things that always comes to me when and I guess I have a fascination with, mainly because I'm a palette knife painter, and I want to make sure that I'm handling edges appropriately. So, and I'm looking at these wonderful pictures that are photos of paintings that are in here, and can you just talk a little bit about edges? Mainly from the standpoint of how you handle them and how you make decisions around hard edge, soft edge, lost and found. And I know this goes back to seeing as well, but just kind of talk about that a little bit. Give us some of your background on it.
Yeah, for sure. Palette knife painting is interesting because there's actually a long tradition, sort of 19th century tradition as well, of being able to use palette knife, being able to think in terms of planes of color value and that sort of thing. So in the book we have a picture, this just beautiful painting of bread by Iram Gershoni, and he has this quote that he sent to me on edges. It was actually just an email that he sent to me, and I thought it was so beautiful that I included in the book. And this is what Iram says. The way I see it, edges are the last and most difficult and subtle component to develop in the personal evolution of a painter. Drawing, tonality, even color can all be learned more rigorously, but edges are more personal. It's really where the soul of the painting resides. And he put that so well, because it is difficult and highly personal. So edges are linked to focal point. And so you can sort of, in issues of contrast. And so the way I like to see it, I don't know if this is going to be too hard to describe in words over the phone, but with value, you have a whole, if you imagine a value string going from white to black, where you have the different sort of grayscale between, you have this range of values. On the one end white, the other black. Well, I like to think of edges the same way. On the one side, you have totally lost edges. You can't see, imagine a dark sea, a tree against a dark night sky, where there's some parts of the tree that you just can't see the edge of. Right. And then others where you've got someone, wearing a jet black turtleneck standing against a white wall, and all of a sudden the entire contour of their bodies are
hard edge.
In relief against the background.
Okay.
so on one side you have a lost edge, the other side you have a totally found edge. Well, there's a sliding scale between all that, between the two, of just, you know, gradually decreasing sharpness of edges. And so in a painting, you're going to find, you know, that whole spectrum if you're looking at life. And so looking at a painting and trying, or your subject, and trying to identify, where is it I'm seeing that highest contrast area? Where am I seeing the sharpest edge? Okay, now where am I seeing the softest edge? And then that becomes your sort of truth, your truth to negotiate. And then also keep in mind that as your eye is sort of moving throughout the image, wherever you're really focusing is going to create that sort of high contrasty effect. And so you want to be able to establish the truth for the whole painting, and so that you don't get confused as your eye zooms in to individual areas. So that would be my quick tip.
Yeah, yeah, and again, we both know it's really hard to talk about edges in just words. It's so much easier in a workshop when you start saying, "See this line here," and now it draws your eyes, and you know. But I think that what you did was wonderful, because I was, you know, picturing it in my mind, and of course I was looking at your book at the same time. But so cheating a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, so I think that's really great, and I really do think that edges are so important, and I love that quote. That was a wonderful quote too. So let's jump ahead real quick to color theory, which is another popular topic, and tell us a little bit about how you tackle that in the book.
The book is a progression. You know, it's not only just straight up technique. Well, we have historical work, and we have contemporary work, and we have pull-out sort of pages dealing with certain subjects like, you know, edges or value composition. But the overall flow of the book goes from a first chapter on value, this value pattern, the sort of poetry of big shapes. The second chapter is all to do with form. How is light hitting an object? How to get that illusionistic quality of value. And then we move through temperature, which is in our curriculum at the Atelier, we start off with two-color painting. And there's no consensus on the best way to start off teaching color. This is an idea, two-color painting, that's explored in Harold Speed's book and others, as a way to sort of break down the process. So, for example, now you know how to use black and white, and you know how to handle value, which is one of the biggest components of color. Is value. Color is value is one of the main ways to help you identify color. And so the next is we use temperature. Now, temperature isn't actually a true attribute of color. A true attribute would be the value chroma or the hue. Hue is just another word for, you know, the color. What color is it? Is it you know, red, blue, orange, green? Chroma has to do with intensity of color. Is it? Am I looking at, you know, an orange from the fruit bowl, or am I looking at, you know, the woody bark on a tree? You know, both can be considered orange. One is going to be obviously high saturation or intensity, and the other one's going to be low. And so we're just sort of break it down, and we start with a really gradual entrance. So you know what value it is. So now can we tell if it's warm or cool? And I think that's a really helpful subject to isolate, because of the fact that so many things we look at in life are really no color at all. So, for example, if you look at the skin in your, you know, arms, there's a lot of subtle shifts. But if you point to exactly what color it is, so, you know, which tube of paint can you pull out? You know, you can't pull out one tube of paint for that. Or a lot of, you know, the wall I'm looking at right now is sort of a light gray, but because of the way the light comes in, there's areas that look almost blue and some that are leaning towards yellow. And so being able to say, okay, what value is it? Now, is it, you know, maybe I can't identify what color it is yet, but can I identify if it's leaning towards cool or if it's leaning towards warm? So we're just trying to establish some big targets that we know we can hit. And then from there, leading into limited palette figure painting. And the reason we do that is because the history of figure painting is a history of the limited palette. A lot of the figure can be conveyed without, a huge range of color, and that's just proven by all the artist palettes we have handed down to us and their limited access to color. And then we move from that into the last chapter, which is just full-blown high-intensity color. And so it's just a really gradually, it's like going on the book is designed like going on a trail. You just start off really gradually flat, and then it just gradually builds up, each section sort of answering a different question and seeing examples. And in the book, we have a whole bunch of different color exercises and the color exercises are really with the, underneath them all is just the desire to get people experimenting with color. So basically a big piece of glass, you have your color on the glass, you have a palette knife, now what starts to happen? And so by getting people directly to the palette and the color wheel will help when you're actually in front of the still life, because you know what the colors are capable of.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of it comes back to, and I really remember the struggle when I was going along my journey, and still, we all have days when we struggle. But standing next to someone who is further along in their journey and sees totally different than like I would see. Like I was standing next to somebody who had been painting for, let's say 25 years or so, and the person saying to me, "Oh, I love that coral cloud that's going by and up in the sky," and I'm looking at the person going, "That cloud is white."
Oh yeah, I remember
because
that.
I'm listening. Oh yeah, and I'm listening to my brain. Clouds are white, tree trunks are brown, grass is green, and white is white.
Yeah, and it's really, there's no better reason to study painting, even if you never make a single work of art, is you begin to see color, and that's just it's a true delight that never leaves you. And if you think with we're in such an incredibly mediated culture, to be someone who could sit there and stare at the ledge of a windowsill and be fascinated, interested, and inspired for half hour or weeks, depending on what kind of painter you are, is a remarkable skill set.
Right. And especially in today's world, and I remember this from another conversation that we had in Art Chat, and we talked about the influence of like social media and computers and things like that. And I'll always remember this, Juliette, because every time I pick up my phone, I hear your voice, and it says, "This is just like drugs." I'm so addicted to that.
Well, I'm an extremist.
Well, no, you quoted a study or something that said that the pattern of the brain.
It is. It's addicting. I don't think anyone's going to argue it with the addictive nature of distraction, especially electronic distraction.
Right.
I think we're just more efficient at delivering that than we used to be.
Yeah, we just got to get to the point where we really enjoy studying that light changes and color changes on a windowsill as much as we enjoy going out on our phones, right? So.
Yeah, well, the one of the things that's really interesting is distraction is embedded in human nature. So if you go back and look at people like the Roman philosopher Seneca, he's saying that life goes by so quickly. We're often at the end of it before we get a chance to realize that we haven't enjoyed it,
Right.
And so the sense that you're like, how could you be distracted? You lived in the year 70. What kind of distraction is that? It's nothing. And so I think that we're more efficient at that our nature, human nature enjoys being busy. And we've just upped the pace a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's kind of a natural extension that goes off from this conversation, and there's a lot of struggles that are going on with folks around, where art fits today in our current society, and I know you've got a lot of thoughts about that, and it's one of the things that you wanted to talk a little bit about today. So tell us a little bit about what your thinking is of how, what do you say to someone who comes to you and says, wow, I really like to make a living at art, but I'm not sure I can. What do you say?
Well, I don't know if people can. It's certainly not, not for most people. you know, if you check in with most people who are making a living at drawing and painting, they really cobble it together. It's, you know,
Right.
it's some people can make all their money from painting, but it's not always exactly like that. But I think, you know, I think that there's almost an aspect to painting and drawing that fills sort of a need in culture that's been vacated by, you know, religion in a weird way. A sense, you know, a concern for ideas of meaning. So, for example, if we look at, I went to go and check out a college for my daughter, and they had a huge building devoted to art. And so I was excited about it. I was going to wait until last to go and see it, and went in, and it was, you know, just what you'd sort of expect. I couldn't even find the art. The place was chaotic. I couldn't see any art that was being done or being displayed. I actually had to get someone to help me find it, like without even a joke. I just couldn't even find it. And then you think, here is a school with 40,000 kids, all studying their various professions. And, you know, our jobs are only one part of who we are as people. You know, because we all have our, you know, driving to work and our cooking of our meals and all these other things. But well, why does it matter ultimately after all? So, you know, great books and great painting and aspects of culture are one way we know that we've got souls inside of us. And so if we begin to allow those to just sort of quietly fade away, and they are and have quietly, you know, been fading away, you know, where is the impetus going to come from for, you know, courage when we need it, or taking a long view, or even cultivating thought? You know, there's a New York Times article yesterday on the end of reflection. You know, what does it feel like to think? And so I think our relationship with technology is weirdly a, you know, it's a trade-off to some degree. You know, many great things are happening culturally. It's really an exciting time to be alive, and at the same time, how can we also make room for thought, for appreciating beauty and finding meaning? And I don't want to be too much on a soapbox, but I know 2 people that killed themselves in the last month.
Oh my gosh.
Right, and this is not for want of money or anything that you'd look at them, you know, these are people, if you met them, that would be smiling. And so, you know, where's room in the culture for why, you know, why we matter? And that's been the cornerstone of art. And so the technique of art is one part, because that's how we give people a voice and we empower people. But the other aspect of it is that artists in our day and age have an incredible calling and a powerful calling. It's not a minor profession, it's a major profession. And so love to see people just get out and own that, you know.
Yeah, and the expression of oneself is a relief in itself. You know, I always ask the question in terms of income, mainly because I usually find out that, you know, that's not the reason why we're in it, and that's typically the answer, and it really isn't why we're in it, because I'm not sure how much money some folks make. I mean, if you look at the $4.2 million or million artists that are out there in the world creating, and you know, that's a lot of art that's out there, and the discovery of someone who has been painting, you know, there's always the misconception that, oh, this is like an overnight success, whether it be a writer or a painter or whatever. It's the 10 or 15 years before that where they were honing their craft that you didn't see, and then all of a sudden you like burst onto the stage, you know. In the 10 or 15 years, it was all about that search of self, and finding what we call finding your voice. So
absolutely. And can we now take that time? Can we give us permission to take that time to study, you know, to remove ourselves from immediate concerns and just dive into it for its own sake?
Yeah, it's been a lot more fun when I've taken that you know, I have to make money at this off of the plate, and just said, you know what, I'm going to study this because I just really want to learn, and I want to be able to express what I want to express. And it's good to be in a position where you don't have to worry about that a lot, but at the same token, don't enter it if that's, as I've heard a number of artists say, don't enter it if that's what you're in it for, because it's the pressure alone will, make it not fun. So, and it is very low. Oh, go ahead, Juliette.
And there's no guarantee that, and money doesn't always solve that. Some of the most successful artists I know are the least happy. And so if there's a way to untether it, even if it means finding a different job that pays you the money so you can do the art that you love and keep it kind of pure, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Right, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Juliette, because I want to recognize you are one really busy person, and we, I do appreciate and I do value the ability to talk with you and be friends with you, because we have a lot of similar interests and we're doing a lot of similar things. But yeah, you are one thing that I'm not, and that's a mother. So you are a mother. Yeah. Yes, 3 kids, and you run an atelier and the academy, and you have your own career, and you teach and you travel, and you're a writer/author. You're an artist. You're an avid reader, and you're what I call a true creative entrepreneur, by the way. So how do you find time to do all this? Do you set goals? Do you have a to-do list that you scratch off on? Go for it.
I truly wish I could tell you I had a staff of people that make my life really easy, like someone to clean stuff up or cook, but I don't. So I am really bogged down like everybody else with a lot of things going on all the time. It sounds really impressive, like I'm doing a lot. It doesn't always feel that way, so I'm glad I've been able to fool at least one person, which is you. I'm really glad for that. But no, these are all things that I love. So, for example, if you take something that you love, I don't know, let's say somebody loves cooking. You have a busy day, you do a million things, but you find the time to go out and do the shopping and to put it together because it gives some kind of joy. And so for me, if the reading and doing the writing is one aspect of my job, I do because it gives me pleasure to have a reason to figure things out and to spend time thinking about things. The painting is at this point it's not even work. It's just like it's just exciting. It's exciting to be able to do that. And then the teaching is community. So I think each aspect of that hits on something that I actually enjoy doing. And so I don't have a very linear schedule. I wish I could have a bird's eye view, see how I manage to make time and do a better job of making more of it. But at this point, it's almost, I'm not doing everything simultaneously. I carve out, a day to teach, and then then I'm painting, and maybe part of the day painting I'll be writing, and then at night I would read. And so it's just almost like it's not multitasking. It's sort of, I can kind of quickly shift between things. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't have a smartphone, and so I'm able to sort of capitalize on moments to keep these things alive, and then to the point that if I get any sort of significant space to be able to use it. But it feels like sometimes it's just keeping, I'm just keeping the interest alive, not able to really go after it at any one given moment. Does that make sense, Linda?
Yeah, the last line specifically, being someone who's always asked the question too, how do you get things done that you get done? With everything that I have on my plate, the writing, the painting, the teaching, the podcast, the I'm doing self-publishing talks up at a bookstore, every month and things like that. And it comes down to, these are things that I am the most interested in doing for various reasons. And each of them has their own reason for doing it, or why I enjoy doing it. If I don't enjoy doing it, I don't do it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I've had people ask, me to do things that I really don't have interest in doing, and maybe because it was, it seemed important to them or something like that. And I'm going to get myself in trouble here because I know there's probably some people who know me that are listening to this at some point. But it's, I'm not talking about anything that's creative-based or creative entrepreneur-based, because typically that, pretty much interests me. But like sitting in meetings
right.
all day long, you know.
Yep, I've done some of those.
For somebody else's,
fun.
for somebody else's passion, you know, I'm happy that you can have a passion, but just don't bring me into it, because if I don't have the same passion, that is just like a killer for me. I can't do it. So, and I'm happy that I always get very, very happy that there are people who are passionate about things that I am not passionate about, because that's what makes the world cool. So.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's great. And then in the midst of all that, sort of busyness, can all of us, carve out time to do a whole lot of nothing, and that's important too. And that's also hard to get on the to-do list.
Right. And I'm sure, the demands of being a mother, which I know that you absolutely enjoy as well. And, those days are special, I'm sure, when you can just have that family time with your family, with your husband and kids, and scheduling that, like you said. And you know what? Scheduling that for anybody that has a true day job, too, is hard. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anybody who's just doing one thing anymore. It feels like, all of us are giving everything we can,
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a few questions. So again, we're coming up to the end of the conversation with Juliette. So if you have a question, please type them in. One more thing, Juliette, the last question I had for you was any other advice for artists that are listening today?
It would. I would really want to be specific for whatever aspect of art they were interested in.
Okay.
So I couldn't. I'd have a hard time giving more of a general blanket advice.
Okay. So Sherry, if you want to unmute, let's get to the questions and see what we have.
Sounds good. The first question that we have, Juliette, is it's a question about your methods for transfers. The question is, what method do you use to transfer a drawing to the panel, or do you draw directly on the panel?
Okay, great question. I do both. I do. Sometimes I'll do drawings, and my drawings tend to be pretty complete. So I'll put a piece of glass, like I'll put some pennies, like on the corners of the drawing, put a piece of glass on, and then just trace, or with a piece of glassine or something, trace the drawing, and then I'll photocopy it and enlarge it up, because some of the paintings get to be pretty big. So I'll enlarge it and then transfer it that way with a piece of transfer carbon paper. And they come in different colors, so if you have a dark ground on there, they have blue or white or whatever you can use to transfer. I also do a fair amount of paintings where I'll just draw right directly on the canvas with charcoal and then ink it with a small, like, micron pen or, or brown India ink, or just spray fix the charcoal right on there. There's a lot of different ways. Some people use Stabilo pencils, which can lock it in, and I've done that as well. So there's just a ton of ways to get that first layer locked in so you can paint on top of it without losing the drawing. But yeah, Kinko's pretty much is enlarging the drawing and then putting something between that to transfer.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The next question is about dynamic symmetry, and I'm just going to read the question as it's written because it's a little bit long. This person says, I teach design, specifically dynamic symmetry. I've read all of your books, and I was wondering how you teach design in your atelier. He goes on to say, you mentioned the armature of the rectangle as well as the root rectangle system of design in Classical Painting Atelier, and I'm curious how you implement that information to your students.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't always get to it every year, to be honest, and it's something that I'm actually trying to fit that in this year, and the year is rapidly drawing to a close. So depending on the years, in the past when I've taught it, we've just allocated a whole week. I have a workbook. We run people through the workbook where they practice, starting off by just actually going out and observing natural forms in nature, coming back, sketching them, and starting to be able to look to see straight line relationships underlying the curve. And so being able to see straight lines within So we try to hit on big concepts first, and there's so many different aspects to that. And then, we always teach them building it up in ellipse in an analytical drawing class, and that the lines we use to break down the ellipse are basically the armature of the rectangle, so that then we begin to practice. In the past, we've analyzed master compositions as one component of it, so there's so many sort of brilliantly designed paintings. So having students sort of tag team between nature, analyzing master compositions, and then designing a few of their own. So we break down that whole process. And then there's some other things to include as well. One of the reasons we don't bring it in every year is because people tend to struggle, students tend to struggle at the beginning so much with just being able to learn to draw, period. And then you start throwing in some of that compositional stuff, and they can end up trying to force their work onto rectangles. So I need to do a better job of sort of balancing that out so that their students are able to get access to that information earlier without struggling to sort of contort anything in order to fit it, because they both can work beautifully together and do work beautifully together. Let me think of, so basically that's it. We tend to break it down into a one-week workshop that hits on various points. And then also, like with books like Henry Rankinport, where he doesn't talk about the armature, but he talks about 90-degree intersection and how that gets used to generate rectangles, which is useful, and hits on various design elements such as some really heavy hitting points of good composition, such as balance and visual weight, and where things are placed in relation to the edge of a canvas, scale, and how that impacts composition. So there's aside from dynamic symmetry, there's a lot of stuff you can add to it as well. Sorry, is that too long-winded?
No. It sounds like we could have a whole webinar just on that topic. There's a lot.
Composition is its own thing. The year is not long enough, I've found, and the same thing with color theory. There's so much color theory. So what we've ended up doing in the atelier is just sort of cycling through various where we hit the information, but we just haven't found a way to do it every single year.
Sure. And I think we have time for one more question because we're almost at the end. And I have a feeling that this is another one that takes a little bit more explanation than we might have room for in a single conversation. But she asks, how do you figure out lighting for still life, and is that covered in your book?
Yeah, we do cover lighting in the book, talk about that. So you can use artificial or natural light. I don't know if the artist who wrote in has a home studio or what it is, but if you can use natural light, often there's a plus and minus to it. There's natural light's a little less predictable. There's a lot more color that gets floated in through natural light, so it's always shifting in a way, and especially if you have clouds and if it's not a north-facing window. So artists tend to focus on north-facing window because it gives you sort of cool, stable light throughout the day. That being said, my studio is west-facing, which is not ideal at all. But because Seattle tends to be sort of gray most of the time, I can get by a lot of the day with using it. Now, there's a certain point in the day when the light will sort of stream right in directly. It's not usable, and then I shut the I've got blackout curtains, and I have artificial light that I have for other, setups that I would have going at that same time. So you can make windows work even if it's not north light. So and you tend to, for still life, use. It's nice to have one light source, one dominant light source. You can float other light in there as well to make it more interesting, if you want. In the book, there are some pictures of that. So dominant. So I guess my top bullet points for lighting is make sure it's clear, clean, bright light that's directly aimed at your subject. You're not having a ton of bouncing light in from a lot of competing sources unless that's something you're specifically going for. And then artificial light, even if it's just a lamp with a head of the lamp that can be angled, is a great one to look for. And if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever you buy your light bulbs, they have whole sections on bulbs, and you can buy bulbs that are sort of daylight equivalent bulbs. They're a little boring, they're not like natural light where you can see all kinds of color in it, but they'll do a good job of just generally feeling like the cool natural light.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I think we do have just one more question, if you wouldn't mind addressing that, and then we can wrap it up. And I think this might be a quicker answer too. We have someone who is looking forward to attending the Atelier at Gage this fall, and they're asking if you have any recommendations for a student before they attend an Atelier.
It's great if you have a little time ahead of time to read a bit. A great one to start off with is Harold Speed's The Practice and Science of Drawing. Reading the first book that I've written, Lessons in Classical Drawing, just familiarizing yourself with basic things that are covered will just enable, when you do hear information, it's not the very, very first time you're hearing it. So taking time to do a little bit of reading is recommended. And then also, if you can get into a life drawing class just to practice, give it. But most of the time, ateliers are designed to take anyone. It's really a very democratic system of education. You show up, and it's a teacher's job to really ensure and work collaboratively to make sure that you get what you need. So I wouldn't worry too much about coming in with anything, to show.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking the time to answer that, and thank you both so much for all the great information that we got to listen to today. We're going to move on to the last slide here, and I would like to take a moment to thank our audience for joining us today. If you joined us late, you can listen to the complete recording of this webinar soon at artistnetwork.com. Stay tuned. We'll have another art chat next month, and I think Linda will send out the details for that when they're available, correct?
Yeah, I'm still waiting to hear back from the guest, so
Okay.
to make sure to confirm it. Otherwise, I'll be out looking for another guest if she can't make it. So.
Okay, that sounds good. So everybody can just visit artistnetwork.com, and we'll make the announcement there, and we'll have another one. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Juliette. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.